man has a choice. I chose the impossible.
When you first start playing the original Bioshock, you can instantly feel that you're going to be part of something special. For me, it is undoubtedly a benchmark in gaming history, but from the first moment that you head beneath the waves and see that underwater city of Rapture, it is captivating. And many of these people who have played that first game released way back in 2007 would argue that this is a masterpiece. And it's not just because it's an atmospheric and gorgeous to look at first-person shooter, but the themes discussed, such as utopianism, objectivism, and utilitarianism, combined with storytelling that is undoubtedly second to none in the gaming world. It should surprise no one that this game is still held in such high regard. And while the original Bioshock has gone on to spawn 2 sequels, Bioshock 2 released in 2010, and Bioshock Infinite in 2013, neither of them have captured the magic or reached the levels of perfection that were seen in the first. However, this video is not about the history of the Bioshock series. Maybe down the line I will make a video about that. But as I said, Bioshock Infinite released in 2013, which means that it has been 7 years since the last game in the series. And while a new entry has been announced, I often find myself asking that familiar question, where is the new Bioshock? Where the hell is it? Hello everybody, I'm Roy McCoy and welcome to my latest video, and this one is all about the latest in the Bioshock series. So first of all, we'll sum this game up in a nutshell, and then secondly, we will look at the development history, including some interesting rumours and leaks. And then towards the end of the video, I would like to talk about what I would like to see in a new Bioshock, before finally moving on to that all-important moment where we speculate when we could see Bioshock. And please, of course, write your comments down below, because I would love to start a conversation about what we would like to see and when we think we'll be seeing this latest game. And if you do enjoy these kind of videos, would you kindly, I couldn't resist, consider hitting that like button. And now, after that terrible reference, let's head down beneath the waves and talk about everything we know about the latest Bioshock. Bioshock 4 was initially announced in 2019 as the latest iteration in the Bioshock series. A number of old and familiar faces who've worked on previous games in the series are returning for this one. However, very few details have been officially announced, such as setting and even name, which is why to this point I have been reluctant to say Bioshock 4, with some people speculating that it could ignore Bioshock Infinite, be a prequel or a reboot. And even as far as the initial announcements have come, nobody even said it would be a first-person game. However, job postings and job listings and other pieces of the puzzle have come together to lead us to believe that this indeed will be a first-person shooter like the previous 3 entries. So now let's talk about the history of this game. So our story has to begin in 2007, when Irrational Games, then under the name of 2K Boston and 2K Australia, led by a man called Ken Levine, brought us that masterpiece that was Bioshock. The second game, 3 years later, was brought to us by a studio called 2K Marin, who were based in the Novato area of California. And then 2013's Bioshock Infinite saw it return to the hands of Ken Levine and Irrational Games, who had reclaimed their original name after rebranding back from 2K Boston. So why is that all important? Well, it does all have some kind of impact on what we know about the future iteration of the Bioshock series. Now, in 2014, Ken Levine made the announcement that after the last piece of Bioshock Infinite DLC, Irrational Games would be winding down to allow him to focus on smaller, narrative-driven games. And he confirmed that he would not be returning to work on a new Bioshock game, which led to a lot of upset fans worried that the game had lost its way. Our first real clue that a new Bioshock was in the works came in 2018 in a piece written by Jason Schreier, then of Kotaku, who was talking about Mafia 3, and went on to say that some of the staff who'd been working for Hangar 13 were moving over to a new studio in Novato to work on a new secret project, codenamed Parkside, and that it was indeed a new Bioshock game. So this was the first time that fans got an idea or a feeling that a Bioshock was in the works. Now, this shouldn't be surprising that 2K would at some point want to bring out a new Bioshock game. This is a beloved franchise. However, when you don't hear about a game for 5 or 6 years, you start to panic that it's going to be joining my What Happened To series. And coupled with the fact that Ken Levine stated he'd be no longer working on Bioshock, this was a welcome break to the endless purgatory of not knowing. And Jason Schreier stated that development on the game started in 2014 when Irrational Games shut down. And he went on to say in a later article that the game itself was started in 2014-2015 and was being worked on by a company called Certain Affinity, which means that 2K outsourced the production. And this was a company, if you haven't heard of Certain Affinity, don't panic, this was a company that had done some work on the Halo series and Doom. However, in 2016, 2K cut ties with Certain Affinity and decided to bring the development back in-house, and the development on the project has since been rebooted. So that's what we knew back in 2018. Nothing official and just the rumours that Jason Schreier was picking up on. And then in 2018, a very interesting leak appeared on 4chan. Now, I'm not a big fan of leaks, because usually a leak is something like, I heard it from the lead developer's brother's cousin's twice removed daughter's fish, who blubbed it in the tank. However, this one seemed to carry some weight, and it feels like this leak has yet to be debunked. Now, what the leaker said is that the game would be announced in the next fiscal year, and that Project Parkside was actually going to be called Bioshock 3, and would be a sequel to Bioshock 2, which implies that the events that occurred in Bioshock Infinite would be somewhat ignored, and it possibly leans to the idea of multiple universes and multiple worlds that was discussed in Infinite. The leak went on to say that the game had been in development for more than 3 years, which ties in with some of that information that Jason Schreier told us. The leak went on to say that the game would be set in the London of 1971, in a world that was still suffering the consequences that brought the events of the fall of Rapture. The discoveries of plasmids and Adam had brought a new golden age to the world, but had also unleashed innumerable crises towards the search for a perfect utopia. The protagonist was due to be a man called Lucas, an orphan of American origins who worked for a certain period of his life in the head of freight forwarding and supply at the main suppliers of the Ryan Industries, and now lives in London as an apartment thief. He is connected to the tragedy of Rapture's falls by an undercover agent of the Pinkerton Agency, and the prologue would take place during a robbery, and meets a young woman called Eleanor Lamb inside a clock tower, who warns him not to pay attention to the so-called gentleman, which originated from the mines in Columbia City, and also to steer clear from the clock tower. There will also be the return of some well-known characters such as Tenenbaum and the Latisse twins. And for those of you not aware of who Eleanor Lamb is, she is a survivor from Rapture at the end of Bioshock 2, which sounds like a solid plot decision. A new city, a new location, but with familiar characters returning, and something strong like Eleanor Lamb to link to the previous series. The leak then goes on to talk a bit more about how the game will work, and it says that the game system will create a hybrid of gameplay from Bioshock 2 and Infinite, and that the game's maps will be larger with more destructibility. It also says that there will be 2 types of maps, more open world and linear maps, but that it will not sacrifice the narrative component. Apparently at this point the plans for marketing have not been made, and that an announcement about this project will be made between December 2019 and March 2020. A number of things in this leak have turned out to be true. And at this point in 2018, it was all just rumours and leaks, with no firm confirmation coming from anywhere. Now, interestingly enough, we've heard the Jason Schreier report that in 2016 the game was being worked on by Certain Affinity. But in 2019, rumours abounded that a new studio had sprung up in Novato, previously the site of 2K Marin, who had worked on Bioshock 2, and that tied in with the idea that some of the Mafia 3 people had moved over to this new studio, and some people started to piece together pieces of the puzzle, noticing that people like art director Scott Sinclair, who'd worked on the first Bioshock, Jonathan Pelling, a design director, who'd done level work on Bioshock and Infinite, and Hoagie de la Plante, a creative director, who'd worked on other Bioshock games in numerous capacities. And in 2019, these people were all in the same area of Novato. And finally, in 2019, on December the 9th, we got the official announcement that a new studio had opened called Cloud Chamber in Novato, California, and were working on the latest iteration of the Bioshock franchise. And experienced people such as Hoagie de la Plante, Scott Sinclair, and Jonathan Pelling, along with a number of people who'd worked on AAA games including Mafia 3, were all working together on this project. And that the studio was to be founded by Kelly Gilmore, who interestingly, up until that, had worked mainly on strategy and tactical games such as the XCOM series and Civilization, which led me and many of the fans to wonder what type of game we could be seeing. Would this be a first-person shooter, or something completely different like an isometric tactics game? And in that initial interview, all Kelly did was confirm that Ken Levine would not be working on the project, that he was working on his own thing, and that she was excited, and that a number of the old band was back together. Hoagie, Scott, and Jonathan, giving the team a core Bioshock genetics. But she would neither confirm nor deny the setting of the game, or really go into big details. Now, there were questions about the fact that there could be live service elements and microtransactions, and she merely didn't say one way or the other. However, this reveal and announcement on December the 9th was bang in line with what was said in the 4chan leak. And while it is interesting to keep in mind that it's just a leak and it is just a rumour, they have got a number of things right, such as the live service element, which has seemingly been proven by later job vacancies at Cloud Chamber. Now, what is really interesting about Bioshock 4 is that the official announcements that have come from the studio or from 2K have been limited. But there have been so many rumours swirling around this game. For example, there are a number of sources that say that originally 2K Marin were working on Bioshock 4. Now, as I said, I don't really want to call it Bioshock 4 because it could be Bioshock 3 or it could be something completely different. But I'm going to call it Bioshock 4 because it is the fourth Bioshock game. But what is really interesting is if that is true that 2K Marin were originally working on a fourth Bioshock game in the Novato area, it makes sense because Cloud Chamber set up shop in the studios of 2K Marin, who had previously been closed quite quietly. And if you head to the official Cloud Chamber website, there are a number of job listings on there: Game AI Programmer, Head of Production, and it seems that the development is split between Novato, California and Quebec, Montreal. And there are two really interesting things to be found on that website. The first is the fact that it says Bioshock, Bioshock 2, Bioshock Infinite, next, which implies that it could indeed be a sequel to Infinite, which I kind of hope, because I don't like it when games or films ignore a previous entry. Yes, sometimes it is terrible, sometimes it doesn't work, but you still need to work with what you've got. And I, for one, really enjoyed Bioshock Infinite. And the second one is this image of a lighthouse, which may just be a subtle hint that we are once more returning to Rapture. And in fact, if you count in the DLC, Rapture has featured in all three of the games, and it is a fan favourite location. So, since from the game announcements, there has been trickles of information, such as dialogue choices that will resemble something like Fallout, live service elements, which, live service in Bioshock, well, if they do it well, and also bigger, more open world maps, which once again was stated in that leak on 4chan. So that is what we know so far. In terms of official announcements, we just know that the game is coming and has been worked on for a while, and that some of the original team are working on it together in the area of Novato and Montreal. But the job vacancies are the big keys. First of all, our first job vacancy seemingly confirms that the game will be first person. Back in October 2020, a posting was advertised for a senior games designer and mentioned that first person camera view experience was required for the qualified applicant. And another listing for a lead combat and AI designer has stated that an FPS combat paradigm that is accessible, satisfying, and allows for a high degree of player expression and experimentation within a highly reactive world. And we also know from the Associate Systems programmer that this game will be worked on in the Unreal Engine. So as of the moment, we have no official date. But of course, right after I talk about what I would like to see, and feel free in the comments below to agree or disagree with me, let's have a conversation. We can talk about a date when I think we will be seeing Bioshock 4, or the fourth Bioshock game. So first of all, I think for me, I would like to see, at least in some point, a return to Rapture. I would like to head back. Now, of course, we've seen Rapture in Bioshock 1, Bioshock 2, and of course we saw it in the DLC of Bioshock Infinite. I would like to maybe go to Rapture in its heyday, before the fall, before the place went to hell, or maybe many years later on a submarine, trying to recover some old technology to help the new society grow. Now, I'm not saying that the game has to be set primarily in Rapture, but I would like to see it as a part of the experience, kind of as fan service and kind of to tie it in with the whole series. And of course, I would like to see once more the Big Daddies returning. They were iconic. But of course, an environment like London, set in a world with Phasmids and Adam, would be incredibly exhilarating and exciting for me. But we've had one in the sky and one under the sea, so why not have one on the land? Or even, what about on another planet? I could quite adapt to the idea of a Bioshock on the moon, a new planet at war with the old Earth, this utopian society, set far away from the world and the things that it hates, because that is what Bioshock always wanted to be. The separate world, the utopian world, set far away from other utopians. So these are some of the things I would like to see, and yes, I would like to see a stronger RPG element with more dialogue choices and more interactivity, open world and destructible environments. These sound like a great idea. So that's enough about my wish list. Let me know in the comments below what you would like to see. But now let's move on to that final question. When could we see the fourth Bioshock game? Now, we believe that it's been in development for around 5 to 6 years, from 2014, 2015, up until 2020. The game was officially announced at the end of 2019. And if you compare it to something like Bioshock Infinite, that was announced in 2010, the game was then seen in 2013, 2.5 to 3 years later, and apparently had been in development for a total of 5 to 6 years, starting in 2007. Back when the original game released, which shouldn't really be that surprising considering Ken Levine would probably have created Bioshock 1 and immediately moved on to the next Bioshock game. Now, of course, Bioshock 2 happened in the meantime from another studio, but he would have been working on that second game, which turned out to be Bioshock Infinite, immediately afterwards. So why am I saying this? It's because well and truly this game could have a 6-year development cycle, and if it was announced at the end of 2019, we could see this game at the end of 2022. However, I don't think we're going to have to wait that long. I would imagine that this game will get a release date confirmed in around December 2021, with an early to mid 2022 release. And the longer we wait for that game, the less likely we are to get it on the old generation, the PlayStation 4. Wow, it feels weird to say old generation now, but the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Let me know in the comments below when you think this game is coming and what you would like to see in the latest Bioshock adventure. But from me today, very hopeful to see Bioshock news very soon. This is Roy McCoy, out!